What do you get when you mix 1 part philosophy, 1 part politics, and cut it with a healthy shot of history?
You get the perfect podcast cocktail. Thank you for listening.
Now sit back, open your drinks, and open your minds. This is Six Pack Philosophy.
Welcome to Six Pack Philosophy with Mike and John. In this week's episode, we're discussing the evolution of consent as kind of a response to some of the stuff that's been happening lately.
The shit that's been happening lately.
Yeah, crazy ass shit.
Yeah.
Yep.
But before we get started, what are we drinking, guys?
You forgot that one, didn't you?
No.
We are drinking Dochis. Dochis.
Like Nacogdoches, like you're from fucking Texas, John.
I'm not from Nacogdoches.
No, but you're
A
from Texas.
Coast-style beer.
A Cold-style beer by the Fredonia Brewery in Nacogdoches, Texas, and who knows what the hell the ABV is. What was that look for?
I totally just spilled my beer. I was trying to put a little bit of it out on the lip so I could get a look at the color, and just straight spilled it down my front.
All right, so if you're playing our game there, everybody finish your beer. Everybody drink.
And now we're recording, so everybody got to see me do that.
That's right. That's right.
Fantastic.
So I'm not playing the game because I'm not going to finish this beer now. So.
Absolutely.
So we're doing consent.
Yes.
And this was inspired by, the Kevin Spacey,
Louis C.K.
Louie C.K., what's the producer's name? Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah,
Yes.
that guy.
All of these people that are now being accused of sexual predation, I guess.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, and there's an interesting dynamic between the two stories because there kind of seems to be two narratives evolving from this. One narrative is blatant sexual assault. You know, the kind of stuff where we force our people force themselves onto somebody, and then there's a second kind that's coming out, and that is people inappropriately asking permission to do sexual acts, and the question itself being inappropriate.
The question because of a position of authority being an inappropriate thing. I think it's what a lot of it is.
Yeah. Well, and go ahead.
It seems that we've come so far from when I grew up, with what consent is, and we needed to come a long way, but I'm wondering whether exactly how far we've I'm wondering if we've gone too far sometimes.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer to that is. I think I kind of want to explore this a little bit.
Well, that was kind of the idea here, because I think we can agree easily that in order to obtain consent, you have to ask for it in some way or fashion. But then I think the thing that we have to tackle is, are there scenarios in which even asking for it does not actually grant you consent?
Yeah.
Asking for it and getting a yes doesn't grant you consent.
I actually started thinking about this question well before any of this stuff came up. Mm-hmm. I was on a road trip recently. The mistress went on a separate one. We ended up meeting up for the eclipse. But I was in the car with my dad for days, and we ended up talking about a lot of things. And
I hope he didn't ask your consent for a sexual favor.
Oh, God.
He didn't have to ask. No, but through the conversation, the point that he ends up making, and I don't remember what the base of the conversation was. It might have been government. I don't remember. But the point he ends up making is that you cannot consent to somebody who's in a position of authority over you. Mm-hmm. It's just not possible. And when I'm thinking of this, the very first thing that comes in is my libertarian side of the brain. I was like, well, yeah, that sounds right. Then you can't consent to any of this stuff, so it couldn't be a government of the people. But then the very next question I had, the very next thing that pops into my head, and I turn to him and I say, so anything your child has ever consented to, whether it's doing sports or whatever it is, was forced upon him because he couldn't have done that. He couldn't have possibly consented to anything. Or she couldn't have consented to anything you offered because, well, you can't consent to an authority figure. And he kind of got this puzzled look on his face. He ultimately said, well, yeah, But I think it was probably a very begrudging, especially I'm sitting here as son, and
right.
I'm so I could have never consented to anything you did,
Yeah.
You totalitarian bastard.
Yeah, exactly. So I started thinking about it then, and then this thing comes along, and we're starting to see more of a national narrative around this same question. Mm-hmm. And I think if you really take that viewpoint to its extremist recesses, first of all, you get some really interesting scenarios, but secondly, it goes to a really weird place that I don't think most people are actually willing to go. But then we see the other extreme of it. We see this Harvey Weinstein kind of pressure, and we say, well, that's not right either. So
pay to play.
Yeah.
Where does this balance lie on consent?
Yeah, I mean, is there any situation in which, say, a boss and an employee, whether you think that has any realm of appropriateness or not, is there any point at which that relationship can be consensual?
Most larger businesses have policy against it because of lawsuits.
Yeah.
There are policies against that.
Yet people do it all the time.
They do, and people lose jobs for it a lot.
And presumably consensually.
Yeah. Well, only if you assume that you can consent.
Well, and that's kind of where it seems to get down to. Yeah, you can grant consent until things go bad.
See, you said something a minute ago, John. You said that your libertarian beliefs said that, you're right, you can't consent to any of this. And I was thinking the opposite. I was thinking my libertarian beliefs tell me I can consent or not consent to whatever the hell I want to.
Well, and I agree. And I think after further consideration, I had to come to that conclusion. But it was just a really convenient argument for all my fight against government. It was convenience. It wasn't really. It was an initial reaction, not a well thought out kind of philosophy at that time.
But there's got to be somewhere in there where we can find truth.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it is. I think about when I was a kid. I can remember the kissing game in school where the girls would chase the boys and catch them and kiss them. And, I let them catch me every chance I got. That was kind of my thing. But there were other guys that I can remember were just like deeply traumatized by this.
Yeah.
In today's, in a modern climate, I don't think you could allow that to happen.
No, I don't think you could.
I want to talk about a few different scenarios with consent, and I've thought of quite a few of these trying to answer this question, and nothing's come to me. But maybe talking it through, we can get a little bit more. Okay, so I want to start with one that exemplifies how consent changes with very minor differences to the situation. Right. So I want to talk about Louis C.K. for a little while. Let's say he walks up to some girl after a show, and he asks if he can perform whatever it is, and she's a fan of the show, and he's asking her if she'll participate in this sexual act. More or less what happened. It was weird things he was asking, but that's not really the point of whether it was weird or not. The point is,
maybe it was weird to you.
Well, could he have asked these things and so we can look at that. And Louis himself, whether this was PR or whether this was a deeply held belief, said, I shouldn't have asked in those situations, right? So he asked some girl, that's wrong according to him. Let's take that scenario and change it, because an hour after he asked that, he asked a question that he should have never been able to ask. He has a serious medical issue. We can imagine it's a heart attack. We can imagine he gets cut and he's bleeding very badly. And what I didn't tell in the story earlier is that she's an EMT. And now she's the closest one. She responds, an ambulance comes, she's working on him. We see an immediate shift in the power dynamic between them two. And at the beginning, she was a fan of his and he held a lot of power over her. Now she's holding his life in her hands. And she's asking him now if he can consent to medical procedures that would mean life or death for him at any given moment. Where did this suddenly become okay with this huge power dynamic for consent between these two people?
Well, I think there's a big difference there, because you've got, in one situation, you're asking for consent to do something to yourself. In the other, you're asking for somebody's consent to do something to them. There's a difference there.
But which one is wrong, or either wrong, or maybe both are wrong? I mean, like, what does that change about the scenario?
I think they're totally different scenarios.
I think they actually are, because despite the fact that she has the ability to either save his life or not, she's not exactly in a position of power over him, but rather in a position of service. That is a service industry. They are providing a service to people.
I think for it to be a position of power, she would have to say, if you want me to save you, now you have to do something.
Yeah.
Okay, but in the original Louis C.K. stories,
yeah,
and I guess for anyone who hasn't followed this, he was asking girls if it was okay if they watched him masturbate.
Yeah,
that was the thing he was asking them.
And at least one of those was an up and coming comedian.
Yes,
whose career he was helping.
Yeah, and there was some infidelity in there. I don't know if that really plays into this consent question, at least between them two.
Mm-hmm.
What? Why is it? So your point was that she is asking him to do something to him.
Yeah.
And your point was that it was a service industry. But really, if you look at what Louis C.K. was doing on stage, he was providing a service to his entire audience. Apart from...
But the service wasn't related to what he was asking.
It wasn't. It absolutely wasn't related to what he was asking. And I think that's an important point to be made. The question that he asked was completely separate and apart from any service he was providing.
Right.
Any power struggle. In fact, the fandom that was completely within the mind of the fan. There were other people who maybe saw that show and thought he was a complete dickhead. They hated him. They were, I don't know if there's an anti-fan. I guess, it'd be like a heckler.
That's called a hater.
Yeah, a hater, a heckler. They were a hater of his, and they completely looked down on him. That two people saw the same thing and had different things. So I think that's a good point. The question he's asking is completely separate and apart from his service. He's also asking if he can do something to himself, and they participate in an ancillary sort of way. The question she's asking is, can she do something to him? And it's directly related to the service she's providing. This, to me, in my mind, seems almost paradoxical. It would seem that it would be much harder for him to consent to her than for her to consent to him. But on an emotional level, when I look at it, the opposite seems true.
Yeah.
I just don't see that connection at all. I see where one, you're asking somebody to do something that has no benefit to them at all. And the other one, you're saying, save my life. There's just a massive difference between those two things in my mind. I understand your logic, but they're just two different horses. I don't see any comparison there. My question about Louis C.K. is the question I have is with the young comedian that's an up and coming comedian that there seems to be a pay for play kind of thing there. Even if he didn't say, look, let me do this and I'll help your career, there's an understood, I'm a successful person in this, you want to be in this business now.
Yeah, well, even when it's not related to sex, there is an understood element of, if I piss off the people who can help me, I'm not going to be able to get as far or not be able to get as far as easily.
To me, when he's dealing with the comedian, and I hate that term comedian, the comedian, I
was wondering if you were mispronouncing that intentionally.
It's my age, okay?
Oh, okay.
When he's dealing with this comedian, he's dealing with somebody that is, to me, it's the casting couch.
Yeah.
You've got somebody that you have a power over of, you can be successful if I back you, you cannot be successful if I don't. Even if he doesn't put the threat out there or make a promise, there's an understood something there. Now, the fan, to me, there's no power there. If we're going to go through and start...
there's hero worship.
There's hero worship, but if we're going to start making groupies illegal, we need to lock up all of the Rolling Stones right now and all of Aerosmith right now. Groupies is just something that's happened.
That's a grossly different dynamic.
I really think it is. I think that's something that's nobody's forcing you. Nobody's really putting pressure on you. It's all you putting pressure on yourself at that point. And that's a different situation in my mind.
Okay. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about inebriation, alcohol, drugs, whatever. Because there has been a movement, even before this started, to really crack down on sexual intercourse and when can you consent when you're,
Yeah, this was really highlighted with the Bill Cosby situations.
Yeah.
But it's on college campuses now, they have at freshman orientation, they have meetings that say that you cannot consent if you've had a drink. You cannot consent if you've had anything.
Well, and the movement has even gotten to some places where people have started to call the movement out. One that comes to mind is a poster that was apparently posted at some campus when it had a picture of a guy and a girl sitting there drinking. It's like, Ashley and James have been drinking.
Oh, yeah.
James asked Ashley for sex, and Ashley consents, but she couldn't consent because she was drunk. This is called rape. And everybody kind of looked at it and said, well, hold on. You said James was drinking. Did Ashley rape James in this?
Yeah.
And
is there such a thing as mutual rape?
Yeah, can you rape each other? And that question's kind of been up for a long time when you're dealing with underage people having sex with each other, and sometimes the court comes through and charges them both with rape. And how does that even really happen if we're going to be intellectually honest about things? How can two people rape each other?
Yeah. Well, and I think I do think that if you're saying, can two people perpetrate a violent act on each other, I do see the paradox there. If you're saying that there are situations in which each person involved in the situation is not capable of providing consent, I see how it could be feasible.
I laughed a little bit. I just thought of this thing when you talk about violent rape of two people like running at each other and they're both determined to rape each other, but they're
funny.
They're like mutually like physically trying to rape each other. And do you really feel bad for either one at that point when they're both?
If you don't suck my dick, I'm going to stab you. Well, if you don't fuck me in the ass, I'm going to stab you. Like,
you go to the wrong party. I don't want to party with you. Lord.
Everybody's stabbing each other. It just depends on with what.
I've got to tell you though, in the modern understanding of this, in all reality, how many of us could in clear conscience say that we haven't done something?
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, haven't hit on a girl whenever you had a couple of drinks or she's had a couple of drinks.
Well, the movement's gone further than that. They're starting to push that you can't even have consensual sex with your spouse if you have been drinking. I mean, how many of us have done that?
Yeah.
Had sex with our spouse?
After having been drinking.
Not many.
I thought we were just going to stop and have sex with our spouse. It's there have been cases brought where wives have sued husbands because they've been drinking and had sex. Now, I think if the husband forces himself on her, yes, that's right.
Absolutely.
Marriage does not give you a right to force yourself on somebody. But if you're both having a few drinks and you decide to go back and have happy time, that's a different situation.
Yeah.
That's my name for it. I call it happy time.
And can you ever have an implied consent at that point? I mean,
there are plenty of people that argue that marriage is implied consent. That one of the things in the marriage contract is
it may be implied consent, but if she's passed out in the bed, that's a different situation.
Yeah. So that's a different situation, and obviously, if she says no, right, that's a different situation. But
implied versus explicit. Explicit wins out.
Yeah. So I mean, with most other girls who I wasn't in a relationship with, if I was going to kiss them, I'd say, I would be expected to say, "Can I kiss you?" So do I have to do that with my wife, or can I just lean in and kiss her in a romantic moment sometime?
Have you ever, I've got to know, have you ever asked the question, can I kiss you?
Nope.
Oh, bullshit.
Did I do it to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I kiss you?
Yeah. It was adorable.
That is adorable.
It was.
Is adorable.
Yes, I do remember that. I did that with her. I didn't do it often. I'm just going to be
let
honest.
you off of that.
You're right.
I don't think
it was the first time, and that was it.
I don't think I ever asked the question. I just went in for the kiss, and I would be a sexual predator today, wouldn't I? It's terrible.
I learned that lesson quickly. I got kicked out of her house after I asked.
No, that was a different time you got kicked out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a little worried about
it. It was when he asked if he could be my boyfriend from now on.
Get out of the house.
From now on, no.
It wasn't even like I did anything. Like I was asking for consent.
Yeah,
you are.
He was.
I think if I was single today, I would have to have like a contract written out and have you sign this.
Legit, if I was single, I have seriously considered because
record the video of yes, they said I could.
Yeah, written contract, something. Because I mean, people are even discussing the whole idea of, is it okay to hit on somebody if you don't know that they're into you? But then how do you ever get to the point where you know that somebody's into you?
Good God, pull your big girl panties up. People get hit on. I mean, it's just the way it is. Now, there's a point where hitting on somebody becomes abusive. Whenever you make it clear you're not interested, they need to stop.
Yeah.
But,
Well, and I think that you can even take that past hitting on somebody. I think there is an implied societal expectation that if we're in the same area together, it is okay for me to communicate with you. That is an implied consent. I can talk to you.
Yeah, we're in public.
Yeah, but at the time when you say, leave me alone, you're withdrawing consent. You don't want to talk to you. I mean, and we can talk about some gray areas. Maybe you owe me money and I'm like, hey, you need to pay me money, and they don't leave me alone. It's like, well, you still owe me money. You didn't change that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we're not talking about those kinds of things. We're talking about just communication, and whether that you want them to leave you alone because it's sexual, because someone's a dickhead, maybe they're being really racist, and you're like, I don't approve of that, whatever it is. I think you can withdraw your consent for
interaction between individuals, but even platonically.
I think it's implied. I don't think you get to exist in society. I think saying I don't even want to interact with anybody, the consent there is stay at home.
Yeah.
I would agree. I would agree.
Yeah. Well, and I know that people may very well come out and say that this is putting the onus on the victim or something like that. But I do think that we have got to not just amend our definitions of consent, but we also have to take a look at the way that people are communicating. Rather than giving him the wrong phone number. Because then you gave him a phone number. You gave him reason to think that you were interested, but you gave him the wrong phone number. You need to say, I'm not interested. We need to be upfront with each other, because then I think that when it does become a question of consent, you can say, no, I clearly articulated I was not interested. And so he or she, I don't want to be sexist here, that person knew that they needed to stop pursuing me, harassing me, trying to whatever.
A really good friend of ours, I'm not going to say her name on here, but she used to have she used to give out this phone number, the breakup hotline number that you could call, and it was the guy from movie phone.
Yeah.
And it was just brutal what people would get when they would call it. I can remember that stuff years ago.
But have the balls to just say no.
Yeah.
Well, and
I've been in that situation where I have been way too polite about saying no, and polite to the point of really being rude, and not just being honest with them.
When I was a single man, I didn't say no a whole lot. So I've got to be honest. I said maybe a lot.
Yeah, and that's what people will do.
At what time?
Yeah, or well, I'm not available this week. Oh, well, I'm busy that day, and instead of just coming out and saying no.
Well, and we talk about these. It's become a modern conversation. Talk about microaggression and what you can become a victim for these days is remarkable, to say the least.
I think we're in a victim society.
Yeah, I mean, you almost get points for it now. But all that said, and there are true victims out there. I'm not trying to say all victims are part of this, but when we talk about somebody being hit on as a form of victimhood and needing consent, isn't that kind of cold, harsh, intentionally hurtful rejection just a form of reverse harassment? I mean, aren't they? And I don't know if I would say they're victims. I would go that far, but I would say they're not any more or less victims than you for having to be hit on. I mean,
yeah, because you have intentionally damaged their self-esteem.
Yeah.
This beer is really burpy.
I just want to know when we became such a weak society that being hit on became painful.
I don't think we are.
Yeah, I don't think we became a weak society. I think that what happened was we've found a new form of justice. I mean, social justice is a thing, and it's a force that can be used for good or bad. And we've found a way to wield a small army in our favor by doing this. I mean, you can look at the politician sitting behind his desk and stroking a pen and say, look how weak he is. He can't take out anything. And meanwhile, in Yemen, bombs are falling and people are dying in masses. So it's a form of strength in its own. You may not be the muscle man, but you found a way to control mass swaths of people with your, whether it's the pen or,
Maybe. I feel like I understand what you're saying, but I feel like as a society, we have become coddled and panty waist, and I'm just, I miss the days when people just stood up and sometimes you got to take your blows. And, there's still people like that out there. I think the vast majority of people are still that way.
Well, and that's why I don't think that we've turned into a victim society.
No, I do.
I think that there is a movement to address our perceptions of things like consent. And I think that there are, on the outsides, people who do very much have a victimhood status, and anything that happens to them, they are the victim of.
They're the loud minority.
Yeah. And I think that there is a subset of people that get really, really angry over it for some legitimate reasons, and some, I think, because this is the way that their life has been up until this point, and people get really uncomfortable when that changes. And so there's a movement, a discussion happening to change our definitions of consent and a few other things. And I think that it's making people really uncomfortable, because the thing about it is, you look at a lot of these people who are whining and crying about, oh, everybody in society is a victim. They're also bitching and whining that they're a victim of these people's bitching and whining. They're kind of doing the exact same thing.
Sometimes I feel like we are a victim of it, but I understand where you're coming from. You know what, though? I think we need to talk about this beer, because I've just about finished this one.
By the way, I did look up the ABV.
Yeah.
It is a sad 3.9.
3.9. That's about what I figured it was from the flavor of it.
Yeah.
So,
and the color.
Who wants to start this one?
I can start this one.
All right.
This is definitely a refreshing comeback from our pumpkin adventure last week.
Amen.
I can certainly say that.
Is it
Am I allowed to
week?
do that on YouTube?
Yeah, it was last week.
Is it last week whenever we put this out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's last week. This is sneakily good, I guess I'll say.
Sneakily good.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
a word.
It is now.
When I first tried it, it wasn't spectacular. It wasn't like, oh my God, this is something different. It was just a Kolsch. And I've had some good Kolsch's and I've had some bad Kolsch's. I've just sat here and drank this thing, and I've enjoyed it the whole time. I've noticed it. It hasn't been like water. It hasn't been just like I need to parch my thirst. It's been like,
But it's definitely a light beer.
Yeah, it is. It's a light beer, but it's been, this is good. This tastes good. I like it.
It's a craft light beer.
It's a craft light beer, but it hasn't overtaken it. I haven't had to sit there and put a lot of thought into it. This is a really solid Kolsch. I've enjoyed it. If you're a fan of lager styles, especially industrial lagers, this would be a good way to transition in. I mean, it's light. Yeah.
It's not aggressive.
It's not aggressive. It's got a light carbonation. It's got a little bit of sweet to it. It's got that. I don't know.
Kind of a green flavor to it.
Yeah, a green flavor. I was almost gonna say like a hint of like maybe that Miller Lite sour. Like, it's not sour, but do you understand?
It's been so long since I've had a Miller Lite, I don't remember.
But it's a lot smoother than a Miller Lite.
And I didn't say that with any snobbiness at all.
None at all.
It's a lot smoother than a Miller Lite,
snob.
and it's very well balanced. I'm gonna give this a 3-2.
3-2.
Really?
You or me?
Go ahead.
All right. Well, she's going to really be pissed at me then, because
Really?
I really like this beer.
I mean, it's fine.
Again, it's a light beer. It's a simple beer. There's not a whole lot of complexity to it, but the flavor's full. I like the way it feels. As light as it is, I think this is Kolsch style done right. And I like some light beers. You know, I'm a little more of a summer beer kind of guy. I really enjoy this beer and would drink this beer all the time.
Would this get you off of Rolling Rock?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, this is
Good.
Definitely a lawnmower beer.
Yes, it
Definitely a lawnmower beer. It's really really
hydrating.
light. It is, but it's still got a really good beer flavor.
Yeah.
I think they did everything right for a Kolsch style. I really do. I'm going to go 3.5.
Well, fucking hell. So it does have a good flavor. It's got a little bit of greenness. You can tell, especially in the smell. It's a little, maybe it's just me. I thought it was a little too carbonated. I've been over here burping like all episode. I'm like covering my microphone, trying to not
Very
burp.
ladylike.
Well, yeah, I know. I'm trying. Okay,
Yeah.
It's not easy. But anyway, I do think it's a good beer. It's been really easy to drink. I finished my first one already. It doesn't do anything for me though. It doesn't knock it out of the park. I think it's well made. I think it's a great base beer. I think that it could have.
I think this is a base beer.
I think it's a good base beer.
I think it's much better than a base beer.
By
but yeah.
base, I mean like it's a Kolsch. It's not a Kolsch and something. It's not a Kolsch special. I think it's a good basic Kolsch. I think it could stand to have a little bit more flavor. It's a little too light for my taste, but with that, I'm going to give it a 2.9.
Still a pretty good rating.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Shit.
That's admirable.
Y'all popped it over 3. I mean, damn.
Well,
You were 0.1 away from it.
I know. And with this rating, it gets a 3.2, which I think is excessive. It's a 5-point
I think that's
scale.
right on the mark.
It's a
think it's
5-point scale.
I think it's good. I think it's outstanding. So and after the pumpkin shit you gave us last week, your vote shouldn't even count.
We had to try it.
No, we didn't.
Yes, we did.
No.
We had to try it.
No, we didn't.
That
Yes, we
pumpkin
did.
spice ale was absolute. That made the speckled chicken's ass.
Oh, now that's not true.
That
Yes, it
was
is.
worse than the speckled chicken's
You
ass.
liked it though, John.
Yeah,
and
not the
that's-
pumpkin shit.
No, but you liked the speckled hen, and that one was shit.
Yes, it was. So anyway, try this Dochus if you can get it where you are. It's it's kind of
Yeah.
a local East Texas beer. It might not be something that you can get somewhere
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
But I'm really kind of.
I was honestly when I opened this, I had low expectations. Now it helped that we had pumpkin
Yeah.
nitro bullshit last week because like I figured it's got to be better than that. But the can is really plain. Seen on the shelf when Anna picked this out, I was like, "Are we getting that?" I mean, it just doesn't look like anything. But I was really surprised.
Yeah.
And
I was
he
too.
agreed. Oh, that one, yeah.
Yeah.
Never mind. I was still on the pumpkin shit.
Yeah. So anyway, back to our topic here of consent. I want to talk about one that surprised me. In the last week, we've seen 3 accusations come out against President George Herbert Walker Bush.
Yeah.
And they've all been
Similar.
similar, teenage to young 20-year-old girls that pose for pictures with him. And in all 3 cases that I've seen, they say that he patted them on the ass after the picture was taken.
And told them afterward, do you know who my favorite magician is? And they said, no, who? And he said, David Copperfield.
I didn't see that part.
Yep.
No. I missed that part.
Yeah, well, and as part
but,
of the press release from his people, he said, they said, I'm really sorry if George Bush is really sorry if he's caused any of these girls any anguish. He's getting older and his strength is failing, and sometimes his hand
Oh, what a load of
falls a little
horse
too
shit.
low. And because he's so embarrassed by it and everything, sometimes he makes a little joke to break the ice to kind of diffuse the situation, and it was just taken wrong.
Nah, bitch,
That
I don't
was-
buy it.
So that was the story. Here's what I think, without having been there, just kind of outside observer. I think he's getting old. Whether this excuses it or not, I think he's getting old. I think he's getting senile, and he's turned into a dirty old man, as we've seen so many old senile people do.
You've also seen something where there was a generation where a pat on the ass wasn't considered to be a bad thing.
Yeah.
And he's what, in his 90s now or late 80s? He's not a young man. And none of these are recent things. They've all been since he's been in his wheelchair. So it's fairly recently. And I wonder about that because I think about growing up and the old men that would, that come here, sugar, and they'd pat everybody on the ass. But that's the generation he's from. Not that excuses it.
Yeah,
but is
you
there,
evolve.
But is there an understanding of where it comes from that it's harder for those people to move on?
Well, and I agree with you. And I've argued often, like, you evolve, but I do wonder, like, one of the things that we know about being senile is it's a quiet and often thing to kind of regress into your childhood.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In fact, I remember, going to visit my grandma from time to time. She was well in the throes of it. In fact, she told my uncle about a very lovely conversation she had with a woman in the bathroom. My uncle was like, well, that's good. And she's hard to communicate with anyway at this point. And after she left, his wife turned to him and said, you know who she was talking about, right? She'd been standing in the bathroom for God knows how long talking to a mirror. Huh. She was just deep in the throes of that. So my question is, while I don't think you get an excuse for growing up in that time, you evolve, do you get an excuse for my mind's going and I'm reverting to my childhood when it was okay?
So here's the deal. If you have progressed in your illness and regressed in your psyche to the point that you cannot control yourself anymore and you have handlers, it's their job to make sure that you are not violating society's norms. His handlers should have had him put his hands in his lap whenever he was taking a picture. They should have taken steps to prevent him from copping a feel on these girls.
Yeah. And I can agree with that. And I want to preface all this in case anyone thinks I know something I don't. This is mostly speculation. For all I know, his mind is fine and he was just grabbing a girl's ass. I don't know.
Yeah.
But looking at his age, looking at his medical condition, it would not surprise me if that played some aspect, no matter how much or little it was. You know?
And things bother some people and don't bother others, and you've got to wonder about that. I had a teacher I worked with years ago who was an older lady, and she would grab my ass every time she walked by me.
So weird.
And I didn't care. I thought it was funny. I laughed at it, and get your rocks off, honey. I hope you're having a good time. I didn't care. But
I hope you said that to
her. I did all the time.
If she's grabbing your ass, that's what she deserves.
I did, and she laughed about it and all this. But I understand why people would be offended by it.
Yeah.
And I don't encourage anybody to do it. But the other side is, it was playful and I didn't care. Yeah. So, you look at that stuff and you wonder. God
and here's the deal. I think that the prolonged period of time, you never told her, don't do that. You laughed about it. I think you guys had an understanding. If she had grabbed your ass and you had said, look, don't do that. Or
what I should have done is reached out and grabbed her ass afterwards, but I didn't.
I'm just saying, if she's grabbing your ass, I think
2017, you grabbed by the pussy.
That was totally 2015.
Okay. Yeah. Or is it 16?
Well, okay.
I think it was 16.
I was thinking the guy who goes up to the local news.
No,
but
Trump.
He doesn't say grab her by the pussy. That was
Trump
in
that was
2016.
That was
yeah,
Trump.
Yeah.
He's still president, so I think it's still relevant.
Yeah. You know what I was talking about, though. But anyway, but I think that if you had at any point given her an indication that wasn't okay, or even if it had been prolonged and maybe your wife came to visit you at work one day, saw the other teacher grab your ass and was like, look, I don't like that she does that. And after a prolonged period of time, you said, hey, look, you don't need to do that anymore. And she persisted, then that's a problem. I think it was kind of out of line for her to do that to begin with, but
I thought it was funny as hell. But okay.
Well, and the thing about it is, while I think there are little things that you can do, and I think it's a risk that you're taking, 100%. It's a risk that you're taking. But you do it once and somebody says don't do it, you just don't do it again.
Amen.
You know.
But I think you're making a problematic argument, one in which I'm going to have to agree with the broader consent movement on. People have said often, and I can be sympathetic to what they're saying, that, well, I allowed it once and I didn't really feel comfortable, but I went along with it. Then he did it again, and I still didn't feel comfortable, but I'd let him do it last time, and on and on and on.
That's a fair point.
And they get stuck in this thing, and I can be sympathetic to their situation.
Yeah.
So have they now given consent when they,
I can't. I think people need to, pull their big girl panties up and say what they mean.
Well, yeah.
Stand up for yourself.
I think it's a fair point, but I think you're absolutely right. And that's why I was saying earlier, we not only have to change our definitions of consent, but we have to change how we communicate with each other. And rather than letting something happen that you're uncomfortable with, have the balls to say, look, I don't like where this is going. I don't like that you did that. Don't do it again. And stop taking it fucking personally. Whenever somebody says, I'm not interested in you, or don't touch me there, or whatever it is.
I have to say that John stopped whenever I told him that.
Good for you, John.
I told him, I said, don't touch me there, and he hasn't touched me there again.
I touched you other places.
Yeah.
Like I was
Nice
supposed to.
Well, it was okay to touch the other places.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, we have to, when
Slightly
somebody's
aroused now.
good, I'm glad. I hope the camera can see that. But whenever
We're on YouTube
whenever
now, by the way.
somebody says, don't touch me there, don't say those things to me, whatever it is, don't take it personally. Everybody in the world is not supposed to be attracted to you or is
Damn
supposed
right
to
they
like
are.
everything that you do. Mike, no.
Everybody's not attracted
Mike,
to me.
no.
Well, and I've made a broader.
Look at me.
Okay, YouTube, look at him.
I've made a broader argument about communicating with a, and I stole this from someone else, but communicating with an air of charity. Communicate without trying to offend people, and when people talk to you, don't assume everything they say is offensive. Like, take it in the best way you can. Quit trying to be offended. Don't try to be offensive. Don't be a dick.
Let me ask you something, John. If we took the modern rules, the rules that are that seem to be developing now on how you're supposed to behave and interact with people, do you think we could exist in a pool hall?
Yeah.
Could we exist in a pool hall? I mean,
honestly, the shit that is said in bars and pool halls.
I'm going to say, I think the answer is yes, but there's a culture in a bar and a pool hall, and people who go there typically don't go there to live by the rules that we're talking about. They go there for that culture. It's the same thing at a biker rally.
Yeah.
There's a culture there. Now, will that culture evolve and drag behind the norm? Yeah, probably. I mean, it has over the years. But I think people go there generally to get away from that stuff. Now, is there exceptions to that? Yes. And do people in that environment need to be mindful of that? Yes. And do people visiting the environment need to be mindful of that as well? Yes. But I think it could. I think people go there to not be in that environment.
Well, and here's part of it. I think that people speak a lot more honestly in places like that than they do in the general public. And I think that's part of what people are trying to get away from when they go there. People say things like, hey, you old bastard, what's up? And nobody takes offense.
And then Mike turns around.
Yeah, I'm telling you. What everybody refers to me as there is the old bastard.
Yes. I was thinking of something.
My mother
else,
was
but that's
offended
okay.
by that. But
Sorry. But anyway, so, people can say things like that and people don't take offense because we know that we're all just there to kind of have a good time and that they know that nobody is trying to hurt anybody's feelings. Nobody is trying to victimize anybody else. Now, we can talk about bars and,
But, even beyond bars, let's talk about just some of society's aspects, because I'm kind of an old-fashioned guy in some ways. And you've all seen me. I'm a huggy guy. I hug my friends. I might call you darling. I might do this. I'm putting myself out there. I'm putting myself in jeopardy doing that now.
Well, and that was what I mentioned earlier. You're taking a risk. Whenever you call somebody darling, you're taking a risk that they're going to take offense to that. But,
Now, I don't call strangers darling.
Right.
But I don't know how many times you've come in and I go, hey, darling, how are you?
Exactly. And I genuinely believe that if I ever looked at you and said, Mike, that makes me feel uncomfortable, that you would stop.
Yeah, then I'd say, what do you want, bitch?
Exactly. And I would be much more okay with that.
As you should be.
Fuck off. See, we're all honest here.
I sometimes call John darling, too, but,
Yeah.
One thing I
Only
wanna,
on Tuesday nights.
That's only behind the building.
Yes.
One thing I wanted to talk about, and we've kind of skirted around this a few times, and we may have answered it, but I want to make it explicit. Is longevity of consent.
Okay.
And I want to go back to the idea that we talked about briefly before of inebriation. And we talked about, can someone consent when they're inebriated? And I think there's degrees to that, because you talk about mind-altering substances. Cigarettes are mind-altering substances,
Yeah.
but I don't think anyone's saying you can't consent while smoking a cigarette. Though that would be hilarious.
Yeah.
Put a good air supply record on that can affect everything.
Smokers can't reproduce anymore.
Yeah, but let's take it to an extreme where it's very clear that consent becomes a murky idea. Let's say that a couple people, just right, wrong, or indifferent, whatever you're into, right, decide that they want to go take some heroin and have sex. That was their plan. They talked about
You
that
went
actively.
to the end.
They talked about that actively before they went there. They got really hound.
Is it 1985? I just need to know this.
No, 1995.
Oh, okay.
Or it could be 2025. Who knows?
It's fine.
I know it makes a difference if it was 85. I'm just saying.
Oh, okay.
But they sit there and they say, I want to, take heroin and have sex. I mean, that's what they want to do. And they take the heroin. And then not only, whenever you have sex, it's never like this very robotic fluid action. There's different things that go on within that, right?
Mine's always robotic.
Well, I know that. Mike.
In, out, in, out.
That's what I like about you.
And the implant.
Just twice.
Yeah.
Just twice. All I need.
But
Best 45 seconds of your life.
It's really slow.
Can that consent that you gave before you were inebriated last into that period? I mean, can you retroactively consent to that kind of thing?
No.
I think you can proactively consent. And I think if at some point later on, at any point later.
Yeah, proactively. That's what I meant, not retroactively. That's a different thing.
Yeah.
I know you rate me, but it's
consented
okay.
a
I
week ago.
consented to what we did last month.
Yeah. But I think.
Sign this now.
Yeah, I think you can proactively consent.
If you can retroactively consent, I'm going to send contracts out to a bunch of people from the 1980s.
Good
Could
idea.
you sign this, please?
Good idea. But I think you always have the opportunity to pull out. That
was a bad choice of words.
that
That was a bad choice of words.
Does your consent expire when you pass out?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there
I think
are.
having sex with somebody that's passed out is just wrong.
I think there are a handful of situations.
What if you pass out during sex?
No, it's just
No, I think
wrong.
you stop.
Done.
You
It's
stop.
wrong.
All right.
Yeah. But I think there are a handful of situations in which all of a sudden consciousness, that I think is the big one.
Yes, you must be
You
conscious.
have to be conscious. So yeah, because
You can't
at
just
the
be a
point-
meat doll.
At the point where you're no longer conscious, you do not have the ability to say no anymore.
That's right.
So
That's
if
right.
your consent, if you wish to remove your consent, you don't have the ability to.
You know what's really funny with this story?
That's why you can't fuck dogs.
Is that the only
That's the
reason?
They
reason-
can't say no.
That's
They can't say no, but
So-
they also can't say yes.
so. If you
That's
teach
right.
them to say no, then it's okay.
no,
Okay,
because they
I see.
also can't say yes.
What if you teach them both?
No.
Just
I-
pick.
One hoof for yes, two for no.
For fuck's sake.
It's funny that we're talking about this because I actually
Don't sleep with your animals,
Yeah.
okay? Don't.
I have a friend. I'm not going to name any names. Probably
I
isn't
want to know
listening.
where this is going now.
But word is,
Oh God, no.
rumor is,
Oh, God.
he had the worst habit of falling asleep during sex.
I'm glad that's where that went.
Me too.
I don't know where you thought I was going.
I don't know.
But yeah,
We were a little worried.
So I mean, it was a running joke, and I don't think any of us really ever brought it up to him because I mean we were his friend and everything. But I look back now and I wonder, like, was he raped repeatedly?
Did she stop?
I don't know. I mean, there's more than one
There are
story.
questions
Of,
to
yeah,
ask
exactly.
Wow.
So here's something. I want to get back to the power dynamic.
So you think it's unusual to fall asleep during sex?
I don't know if it's unusual. I just know the story is he did it.
Okay, I just
you know?
wanted to check.
So
I thought it was good sleep therapy.
I want to get back to the power dynamic. Because there's kind of an issue here.
Yeah.
Money has power, period.
Yes.
I think we can agree with that. How does consent play with prostitution? Because the person with the money has the power. And I think that...
Not really.
Well, I think that this whole movement could be used to say that a person cannot consent.
I don't think you can say the person with the money in prostitution has the power any more than you can say the person with the money at the Buick dealership has the power.
Well, if they can say that your boss, the person who ensures your paycheck, has power over you, that's
well, if you're
very
working
similar.
in sales, does the person you're trying to sell something to have power over you?
Yeah, you're just working in sales. I don't see it.
I think if you're fucking with the people that are you're trying to sell to, then yeah, or rather, if the people are saying, if you sleep with me, I'll buy from you, then yeah, they're exerting power with their money.
See, that's why when I was working in sales, I made sure I was ugly enough no one would fuck me. I didn't want to get in a bad situation.
Wait a minute. Does that happen? Where
happen?
People show up and say that I'll buy this from you if you'll fuck me?
Yes.
Because I need to get in that position. I need to get in that job because I'm game.
I know you are.
Well, for commission, I'm there.
Hold on, did you say gay or game? Because
Game.
gay pays way more.
Yeah.
Not that much game.
I don't know. You know, I can tell you that from friends of mine. Oh, that's going to get turned to a joke really quickly.
Yep.
Anyway, whatever. From friends of mine, that in sub-dom rings, that the consensus is that the sub is the powerful one in the relationship, and they get there through some logical hoops to say, well, they can always say stop, but the other one can't. But it's a pretty well agreed upon fact, I'll say, within those rings that's the case. Even when you get into professional dominatrixes, and you know, I would imagine within that culture that there's probably now, are there exceptions where there's rape? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's probably the pretty generally agreed upon standard with that situation as well.
Wow.
Okay. Well, and I want to be clear that I don't think that the exchange of money for sex in a professional capacity violates any sort of consensual acts under standard conditions.
Yeah,
I think there are situations in which it can.
Well,
but
I think there are. I think there are
movement-
situations like if your landlord shows up and says, you can't pay your rent, have
Fuck
sex
for rent,
with me, or I'm going to evict you. That's a different situation than, here's a couple $100. Let's see what you can do.
Yeah. And so I don't think that has consensual issues, but I do kind of look at this movement and wonder if it couldn't also try to rope that into it. And I hope that it doesn't, because I think that there are people out there that legitimately do this work because they want to do this work.
But you talk about this consensual stuff and get moving past prostitution. Let's talk about other places where power has been used. Let's talk about the clergy a little bit. There's been a lot of cases in the last decade or so where it's come out that there's been a clergy that's used their position as a spiritual leader to have sex.
Yeah. Well, and not even just, I assume you're referring specifically to the stuff happening in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to just be that. We've seen it in the Catholic Church. We've seen it in the Muslim world. We've seen it, we've seen it in a lot of places.
Yeah. Yeah.
School teachers. There's been I don't think it's happening more than it's ever have, but it's more
Coming
public
out more.
now.
Yeah.
Of teachers using their, without a doubt, that's using your authority.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
Well, and I think that is because our conversation is changing. Our dynamic and our expectations are changing. And people are coming out realizing that they can.
The world's different because I can remember.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not just ancient. I'm 45.
Right.
But I can remember when I was in school, there were a couple of teachers, a couple of coaches, at least one principal that married former students, that married people a year or so out of high school that you knew they were dating when they were in high school.
Right.
You know, you knew it did. But they graduated, they married, and everything was fine. And that was accepted. If you did that today, you would be in jail.
Oh, yeah.
You would be in jail today.
Yeah.
Times have changed. It's just not something that's accepted. I think the same thing is true with clergy. There were certain things that were accepted that are not accepted anymore.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you can even look at politics. Now, I think we have one situation where someone's an intern or political to the world. But, you know, this raised a question in my mind. I want to talk about a power dynamic. A politician, their constituent.
yeah.
I mean, is that a power dynamic? And where do we go there, you know?
Yeah.
I'll fuck you if you vote this way. Is that the deal?
Well, maybe it's not even. Maybe it's even quite the opposite.
Sometimes, what if it's, you know,
Oh, for donations?
Support a bill,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
support a bill
tax
because it's gonna,
breaks for your daddy's business?
Yeah.
yeah, whatever it is, you know.
I guess I went too simple there.
Yeah.
I did not go corrupt enough.
Yeah, you got
Absolutely not. You can,
and you know what happens?
Yeah.
You know, we had a state senator from just north of us about 10 years ago that ended up serving out his Senate time in prison because he was sleeping with an intern that worked for him.
You pulled a Bill Clinton?
They got him for prostitution. He was paying her.
Oh, damn.
well, and then the other thing that just popped into my head, and I think this probably happens more often unwittingly, is sex its own power. Some
Hell yeah, it is.
Some
If you do it
senator,
right.
some senator falls madly in love with a girl, and then she's saying, "You know what? I think it'd be really nice. I think it'd be really nice if there was a rule making animal shelters walk dogs." Has she exerted her power over him, and in that same way, kind of broken what was consensual before?
Now, at that point, could the person in the authority, could the politician bring charges against the person he'd had sex with?
Yeah,
Has
it was
been
really
flipped at that point?
insecure.
Has it been flipped at that point? Think
Yeah.
about Gary Hart. Y'all are too young to remember, but Gary Hart was running for president. Let's see here, 84, 88, 84, I think. He was the front runner for the presidency, and he had this really hot secretary, Jennifer Flowers, and pictures showed up of her sitting on his lap. She sold those pictures to the papers, and it wouldn't have been so bad except the boat that he was on was written behind it. It was called the SS Monkey Business.
Oh, my.
But
That's unfortunate.
Gary Hart went from the front runner to and also ran overnight with that. Could Gary Hart have brought charges against Jennifer Flowers, who was his secretary, because she used that force against him?
Yeah, well, and going all the way back to the original spark of this conversation, what was his name, the comedian?
Louis C.K.
Louis C.K. 4 of the 5 cases were just people who were infatuated with him over his work. Can somebody become infatuated with someone else over romantic reasons? And does that infatuation carry the same weight as a comedian's work and their infatuation over love reasons?
I do want to touch on Louis C.K. just a minute and say
Do you?
that yeah, I do touch on Louis.
He'll touch on himself. You just need to watch.
You just got to watch. Just ask me first, Louis. Just ask me first. Please don't ask me, Louis. Honestly,
Because he can't say no.
I want to bring this up because I found myself in a weird position with Louis C.K. Where when it was all over and he came out with his statement, I had a strange respect for him for his statement.
Yep.
I found that the fact that he came out and said, he didn't try and deny it. He said, yes, this happened. Yes, it was probably wrong. I shouldn't have done this. And now I understand that. I have a certain amount of respect. Even if it was a political reason, the fact that he didn't try and work around it.
Well, and here's the deal. I think the reason that it feels like a strange respect is because it was a pretty grimy situation. But the fact of the matter is that we have so many times had to deal with somebody coming out and saying, oh yeah, I did this terrible thing, but this is why, and I've got all of these excuses, and oh, by the way, I'm gay.
Yeah,
for
but
some fucking
There's
reason.
a difference here because when Louis C.K. came out, the stories all said the same thing. He went to these women. He said, is it okay if I did this? They said yes, and he did it.
Well, and to that point, yeah, I had a respect for him saying it, but I think it should take something away from the respect we have for him. That, if you look at these stories, if you really analyze them, he had no repercussion that could happen to him for doing it. He didn't break a law. Mm-hmm. He did something that was questionable.
He could have lost a
ethically.
career. I mean, we saw
He's lost a lot already.
Kevin Spacey lost his career over this, basically.
Right.
For now, anyway.
Yeah. But
the charges against Kevin Spacey were a lot more gray in the law. He was fine in the law.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that he did nothing. He did something, and it was important what...
Maybe he did.
No, I'm not saying he did something wrong. I'm saying there was courage to his act.
Yes.
He did something when he came out. But if you compare his situation to, let's say, a Harvey Weinstein, what Harvey Weinstein was looking at for coming out, for just saying, look, I did these things, versus what Louis C.K. is looking at, I think there's a difference in penalty that we have to consider and say...
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point to make. He had a lot more ability to come out and take responsibility for what he did.
Yeah. I think so too. But there's still a difference there.
I respect that. I completely respect.
And I'm still not sure where I come down, because I think there were 4 cases on Louis C.K. Only one of those that I can remember was really in a position of was a comedian.
Benefit.
The rest were fans. And to me, there was nothing wrong in the fan situation when he came up and said, "Can I do this?" And they said yes. He did everything right.
Yeah.
Now, the comedian, where he had a degree of power, that's a little different. But even then, I've got to wonder, is it never okay to have a relationship with another comedian?
Yeah.
Is it never okay? He asked.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly kind of the point that I was trying to make with the whole boss-employee situation. Because in many ways, he was acting similarly.
Yeah.
He had the ability to influence her career, much like a boss or manager would.
Yeah. But I mean, how does a boss have a relationship? I mean, your whole life is work usually. How do you have a relationship if you can't?
You have to take a vow of celibacy if you go into politics, if you become a boss, or if you go into religion, or if you become famous. Just becoming famous, you got to take the...
Yeah.
So I don't know. I found myself when this whole thing started, thinking I was going to be on the side of, this is ridiculous. We've gone so far. We have got to back this up. To now, I'm in a place where I'm like, maybe we really are this fucked up. I don't know. I think I have more questions after this episode than I have answers.
Well, and the thing that I come to over and over again every time one of these stories comes out is, I hope that people will take away from it that we have to communicate more honestly with each other. That when somebody asks you a question or does something or expresses that they want to do something that you don't like, we need to be honest with each other about it. And we need to not take a rejection personally, which is hard.
Yeah.
But we've got to do it. Because if we can, and I think in a lot of ways, if we examine our society, I think we're becoming more honest with each other. And I think that's kind of where this level of discomfort that we're hitting is that we've spent a lot of time not being honest with each other and having these cutesy little ways that in our particular cultures that we can skirt around the dark, dirty truth. And we're kind of tearing away from those. And we're starting to be more honest with each other.
I wonder if that's good, though.
I think in a lot of ways it is. I think there are some areas where you can be too honest or too brutal. I think you can be too brutal.
Sometimes that's kind of the lubrication that makes society work, though.
And I think there's an element of that. But I do think that we've been too dishonest for too long. And I think I think the fact that we are getting more honest is fantastic.
Part of me misses the old days. Part of me misses the old days whenever, you could call somebody sugar or doll.
Bless your heart. And
I still do that. But when you could say sugar and
do
doll
you
and
mean it in
darling.
a mean way?
Yeah.
Yes. Bless your heart, you little bitch. Yeah. But
that's not supposed to be a mean thing to say.
I know.
But apparently it is. Apparently that's how everybody uses it, which is a fucking lie. And I don't appreciate it.
It's how we maintain peaceful relationships with California.
It's civility.
Fuck everybody.
Civility.
You know what? Don't say bless your heart to me. If somebody wants to say fuck off, bitch, I wish they would just say fuck off, bitch. And that's where I keep coming down to. I really appreciate that society is getting more honest, and we just have to stop being uncomfortable with it and just be honest with each other.
Well, I think with that,
I'm on a soapbox.
I think with that we can, John and I can both say fuck off, bitch. And
Fuck you guys, let's end the show.
I'm not going to say that. Bless your heart.
Fuck off, jackass. Is that better?
This has been a lot of fun.
It has.
I don't know. Did anybody make any progress here, or are y'all as confused as I am at the end of it?
No, I think we did, because I've been arguing this case since that trip with my dad in my head for months now. And I got to get some outside voices. I got to bounce some ideas. I got to hear some other perspective. And, honestly, we're 3 people in a room.
Yeah.
I think there's more perspective to be had on this. If you have a perspective that you want to share with us on your thoughts on any of the stuff we've said here,
Leave a comment down below.
if you're on YouTube, leave a comment down below. If you're
That
not
also works on Facebook and our website.
It works on our website. Nobody's listening there. It works on Facebook. You can't listen there. But if you can't leave a comment, the 2 places you can do that, you can either go to our Facebook or go to our YouTube now, because you can comment directly on the video for this and interact with other people doing the same.
Or send it on a carrier pigeon.
That worked. Or
That's
smoke
how
signals.
it gets to Mike. That's how Mike gets it.
Yeah.
Smoke signals.
Yes, but let us know, and if you like what we're doing here, if you appreciate the show, click the like button. If you want to hear more, click the subscribe button. And if you really appreciate what we're doing, please go to patreon.com/sixpackphilosophy and support us. You can either do that with with $1 a month, and we'll send you koozies, all the way up to multiple
100.
$1 million.
Whatever you want. Whatever you want.
Or one time, if you just want to drop a few dollars in the bucket.
If you want to see a picture of my ass, just go ahead and send us some money and ask for it. And
Really,
I'll
if
send it to
you don't have to pay any money, if you just ask for it, he will give it to you.
I'm not going to go through all the levels because we're changing them soon. But if you go to patreon.com/sixpackphilosophy, you can see what all the levels are, and you can choose how you want to support us.
Yay.
Yay.
So, with that, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed it, because we have. We'll be back next week, as we have been for the last 3-ish years.
3 years.
Yeah, ish.
And we're coming up on our New Year's party.
Yeah, New Year's party. It's going to be fun.
Rock on.
Yeah, so check it out. And
We're
thank
about
you so
to get
much.
the worst clink ever.
Worst clink
Are you
ever.
ready?
Bing.
That sucked. All right. Bye, guys.
Cheers.
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 I was supposed to clink after the cheers. Oh, well.
Six-pack philosophy can be used to treat closed-mindedness, straight ticket voting, and faulty reasoning. Side effects of six-pack philosophy may include questioning the status quo, thinking for oneself, and erectile dysfunction. Ask your bartender if six-pack philosophy is right for you. And as always, keep on drinking and thinking. This has been Six-Pack Philosophy.